right, John, let's get into our Eagles. All right, Tuesday, July 22nd, the Eagles report to training camp. Wednesday, July 23rd, their first practice at the NovaCare complex. I do want to alert everybody listening to the show today. We will have a much different schedule for the next couple of weeks after this week. Okay, so next week, I believe they're on the field for 2 days next week, and then there's 3 days, 1 day, or they're on for 4 days. So anytime that they practice in the morning, our show will be in the evening. We will have a night show because John will be down at the NovaCare complex early. We will probably do football 24/7s early to try and get you some content early, but not very long. So it'll be a whole different looking schedule for everybody. So make sure you guys stay locked in, even if we're a night show. I'm sure you'll appreciate the great content that John can give after each practice. So keep your eye on that. But John, I'm ready, man. Training camp's kicking off next week. Our last off-season show is this Football Friday.
Oh, we got Monday, Tuesday, but yeah,
you can make the argument, but I feel like next week with camp kicking off, it's not going to feel like the off season.
Right. And I should add that you can always listen on demand at any time, so it shouldn't. And in a lot of ways, I think it's better to talk after practice than pre-practice,
right?
And obviously, you're talking about what happened, but. Before I jump on, Andrew Brandt just tweeted something out. So to wrap up the NFLPA thing. So here's Andrew. And the reason I get stuff like that right is because of people like Andrew, and talking to them over the years and access. But, he tweeted, NFLPA was already known as the weakest of the professional sports unions, having given away things like pro-owner revenue splits, 17th game, continued franchise tags, etc., for easy givebacks like practice time, quality of life issues. Now a fire hose of stories of concealment, secrecy, suboptimal. This stuff's been going on for a long time. It just got much, much worse when there was the obvious conflict with Lloyd Howell with the NFL versus somebody like D. Smith, but they still gave up pretty easily. But as far as the Eagles, we finally reached the finish line, and it's apropos that the ring ceremony got postponed. It was originally scheduled much earlier, but because that's the last thing from last year, the guys get their rings, and then you move forward. So maybe a nice, obvious demarcation line and training camp, first practice Wednesday morning. And we're off and running all over again. And the good news about that is, again, a lot of things have to go right to win a championship, but the Eagles are there's always, if you want to be real, there's always about 5, 6, maybe 7 teams at the most that have a real legitimate chance of being a Super Bowl champion. And if you're in that group at the start of training camp, and the Eagles are, you should feel pretty good as a fan.
No doubt about it. Johnny Mac, let's recap a little bit of what they did this offseason. I know we've talked about it all offseason, but I do want to reset the stage. I want to remind everybody of what happened this offseason, what to look for in camp, and how to be a viewer, a knowledgeable viewer going into training camp next week. Offseason recap, we'll start on the offensive side of the ball, John. Not much change there. Kevin Patullo becomes your new offensive coordinator. Kellen Moore gets hired in New Orleans. Parks Frazier gets elevated. A new quarterbacks coach in, Scott Loeffler, is here. Your thoughts on those offensive changes and what to expect from this new-looking offensive coaching staff coming into this year with 10 of 11 starters returning, right guard being the only position of change right now for that offense.
Yeah, I think, and there's a couple other, as far as the coaching staff, couple lower level guys. Greg Austin is back because TJ Paganetti went down with Kellen. Kyle Valero went down with Kellen, which made sense because he came in with Kellen. He was one of the few people that Kellen got, and they hired Montgomery Van Gorder as an offensive assistant. People might remember him because he was a quarterback in college at, I believe, Georgia. Well, he's a coach at Georgia. I know he was at Notre Dame and he transferred. So some pretty high profile programs. So he's a part of the staff as well. So much more upheaval with the coaching staff, but I think the continuity remains because really the only completely new guy is Leffler at quarterbacks coach. He's the Bowling Green head coach. Comes in to be, work with Jalen Hurts on a day-to-day basis, and Tanner McKee and Kyle McCord and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But even Parks Frazier had a long history with Nick Sirianni back in Indianapolis. So, and Kevin Patullo's, his right-hand man on the team. So I don't think the continuity aspect is going to be a problem on the coaching staff. And then even less so with the players, as you mentioned, 10 of 11 starters. And the guy who's projected to step up has played a decent amount in Tyler Steen. So
even both options there, John, if it's Matt Pryor, he's got tons of experience as well.
Yeah. So everything looks good offensively. The only question is, can they get up to the expectation level, which they haven't really reached over the past 2 years? Number eight. Certainly have the talent to do it, and we'll see how it shakes out. But I wouldn't lose too much sleep over their offense.
No, I'm not losing much sleep. Some of the changes on the player side of things, not changes, but some of the things that happened this offseason. Cam Jurgens signed his big 4-year extension. Saquon Barkley added some years to his deal after his historic season last year. And I believe Lane Johnson was also restructured like he always is. But that's it on the offensive side of the ball deals. The wide receiver corps got a little bit deeper. I think there's more players out there. Jahan Dotson's obviously your wide receiver 3. And then John has talked about some of the guys that are there after Jahan Dotson, and they give maybe the Eagles a little bit of lenience depending on how good they do at training camp. And then in the running back room, you added A.J. Dillon coming in here to bolster that group a little bit with Will Shipley, those two guys behind, obviously, Saquon Barkley, the all-pro, first-team all-pro running back there. So, John, not much moves on the player side of the offense, but and we just kind of talked about it a little bit, but those deals did get done. It was nice to see Cam Jurgens get his extension. Kind of a beautiful thing, John. Not many teams can have a Hall of Fame center retire. And a year later, their replacement gets a 4-year deal, almost max near the top of the league. So,
well, yeah, bigger deal than Jason Kelce ever got, which is obviously about that's just the nature of
Did you see the graphic that came out yesterday of the TJ Watt deal as compared to what JJ Watt made in his entire career? It's pretty crazy how much the money's going up in the NFL.
It's kind of, it's. I get why people do it, but it's not a fair comparison. But yeah, I mean, that's just the nature of NFL contracts.
Which, by the way, we just talked about the NFLPA. If you want to quiet some of the noise, you can say, look at how much more money the players are making. We're not doing it all bad. So they could use that a little bit.
Well, that's tied to escalating TV rights and nothing else. If TV rights go down,
I'm saying they could still drop it in their positive category.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's PR, but it's not real. And again, the biggest thing about NFL contracts is it's all bullshit. Number one, and by the way, I fall into this category because everybody does. Because you can't get the numbers immediately. So, and this is more of an agent problem than a NFLPA problem. But they report these numbers like 4 years. 68 million, which is true, or like Milton Williams going out the other way, $26 million a year, which is true on paper, but that's not how the contracts are structured, where the vast majority of contracts are not all, but some quarterbacks get more. But the vast majority of contracts are 2-year deals. And the more important number is the guaranteed money, which everybody knows. but yet the default is the original report, which is, to use Cam as an example, because we're talking about 4 years, 68, 17 million average annual value, which is pretty stinking impressive. Now the real number is, I'm just looking it up. The real number is 23.3 guaranteed at signing. Real numbers, 43.3 million in total guarantees. So still very impressive, but it ain't 68 million. Now, he's young enough and he's good enough that I think he'll see that entire contract. And actually, he won't see it because they'll redo his deal after the but what I'm trying to say, I think he's young enough and good enough that he's going to get all that money and probably more. But it's not a real number. It just isn't. But that's an agent to say, hey, look what I got for my client. Sign with me. That's what that is.
Right. It's still, I do still think it's significant, even if the number's not as big as it was reported, that you have a player that you feel as good about, post Hall of Fame center that the Eagles have. You know what I mean? Like most teams, some teams, it takes 10 years to replace a Hall of Fame guy they lose. The Eagles, Fletcher Cox goes and they got a replacement Jalen Carter. J.C. Kelsey goes, they got Cam Jurgens. Brandon Graham goes, hopefully Nolan Smith can pan out. I mean, it's pretty impressive the way that the Eagles set up to lose some of these really really good players that they
he's a very good. I'm not trying to dismiss. I was just using Cam as an example because we're talking about him. His extension, which is tremendous, and he got a ton of money for a center. But the original numbers, and that's for every player in the league, including TJ Watt, they're not real. And until they're filed and we get to see the actual contract, and the most important number is the fully guaranteed number. That's the most important number. That's the real contract.
Good stuff there. There's the update on the offensive line there and the offense really as a whole. John, what about that wide receiver corps? Just touch on that a little bit before training camp next week. We've talked about how we feel it's a little deeper this year. I know you have Jahan Dotson at the 3, and there's some guys maybe who could give the Eagles some maneuverability if they play good enough in camp. If they wanted to trade Jahan Dotson, not saying they would, but maybe if a guy stepped up, they would think about doing that to extract some value out of him going into the final year of his deal. Who do you like behind Jahan Dotson in that receiver room?
Well, yeah, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but I think it's sort of a two pronged situation at backup receiver. I think you have the role players, which to me would be Johnny Wilson as the blocking receiver in a run first offense, Anaya Smith as the gadget guy, if you want that type of player, versus the actual receivers. And I think that's where Terrace Marshall potentially could come in, or Danny Gray could potentially come in. And, it's a difficult decision for Howie Roseman because, if you're talking about 4th and 5th receivers, you generally have to play on special teams. Marshall's probably your 4th best receiver, but he's not going to play on special teams. So you just stick him there in case of emergency, in case somebody, Devontae or AJ, misses a game. Maybe you can get away with, having better special teams players elsewhere. Maybe not. Johnny Wilson's an interesting player because I don't think there's many teams he would be making NFL rosters, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think Pumper's the guy. Where's he been, by the way? Have I been too hard on Pumper? I haven't seen him.
No, he was in here yesterday on the at the show. Yeah,
sorry,
but he's working in Asia, so Pumper is different hours. Yeah, So he's all over the map, but he'll be in. He was in yesterday on the show.
All right, just double checking.
You saw my boy B Pump.
He he might have been moved to tight end by most teams. But the Eagles were very steadfast early on that he was a receiver. And, depending on your definition, he's a hell of a blocking receiver. But that's, going back, you never want to be described as a blocking receiver as a receiver.
Right.
But he's got some Zach Pascal traits.
And it works. I mean, we got Saquon Barkley in this running game, so I guess that's why he's more valuable here than anywhere else. Maybe he's one of the guys, John, that they kind of play that roster game with,
No, I think he's going to be part of the team for that reason.
Okay. A guy I don't really see a role for is Anais Smith. I mean, you talk about the gadget guy, but didn't they just sign Avery Williams to do the kick return, the punt return? If he pans out at all, what is the role for Anais Smith as a gadget guy? I don't see it, but maybe there's something there that more than meets the eye to me.
Well, I think they did sign Avery Williams to do that job, but he wasn't able to practice at all in the spring. So number one, got to see where he is health-wise.
Right.
That's most important. And again, I'll run down the list. Harrison Bryant, or wherever JD is, A.J. Dillon, Josh Uche, Charlie Hewlett, Adoree Jackson, Patrick Johnson, Avery Williams, Kylan Granson, Azeez Ojulari, Kendall Lamb, Matt Pryor, Terrace Marshall, Keelan, even if you want to add Keelan Robinson, who's a waiver pickup. All these additions, one-year guys, you can move on from any of them at the blink of an eye. Avery Williams got 1 year, $1.27 million. But go compete, go beat them out. He's got to make the team last year. He got some dispensation. I'm talking about Anais from being a draft pick last year. No doubt about it. Howie can say whatever he wants. He got some dispensation because he was a draft pick and he didn't want to cut him. From a meritocracy standpoint, he didn't make this football team, but they kept him around. Now he's got to make the team. And the guy he's got to beat out is probably Avery Williams. Could he do it? Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
if you would have told me last year coming in before I saw him with his reputation at Texas A&M, I would have been the exact opposite. I would have been like, and if Avery Williams was here, but he wasn't, I would have said, well, Avery's got no shot. So it's interesting how the tables flip, and now people think Anais has no shot. He's got a shot. I'll tell you what, still during the spring when AJ barely did anything, Devontae and teamwork. Devontae wasn't here for OTAs, was down in Florida, and at mini camp just did a handful of reps. The first team receivers, because they didn't have were generally Dotson, Smith. Not generally, they were Dotson, Smith, and then Marshall if they went to 11 personnel. And Smith was even ahead of Marshall. So they're still giving him a degree of dispensation. But he's got to make the team this summer. No doubt about it.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. John, is the running back room in your eyes better this year coming in than it was last year with Will Shipley and A.J. Dillon versus last year it was Kenny Gainwell and Will Shipley behind Saquon Barkley? Obviously, Saquon's coming in, so there's no concern there. But the backups, do you think they're better this year or were better last year?
Potentially better, but it's all got to do with what does A.J. Dillon have in the tank?
Yeah.
I mean, he might not be on the team, and he might be the best backup running back they've had in years. I was always intrigued when Jody was doing the show with me. I would always advocate. I'd like to get A.J. Dillon. This is before the days of Saquon Barkley because he was a backup in Green Bay. And I always had this desire to see a big, physical back behind this offensive line. Just a north-south guy who's going to beat you up. What that person could do behind that offensive line. But, you know, that was 2021 or 2022 or whatever it was. This ain't the same guy. Part of that physical style is it takes a tremendous toll on you. And obviously, AJ missed the entire season last year with stinger issues. And the year prior, you know, was the first year that he was under 4 yards a carry. So there was, you know, evidence that he was kind of wavering. If you go back to his height, he was one of the best backup running backs in football. 187 carries, 803 yards, 5 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns over 2 years. I remember watching play. He would just bulldoze people. So my bet would be they're not going to be as good. If AJ Dillon can revert back to that sort of like Josh Uche, it's been a long time, but if he can revert back to that form, they will be better. He didn't play last year. That is a red flag because he's not. It's not like he can stop being a physical runner. And you got stinger issues as a physical runner,
right?
I don't like the odds there of staying.
I share in the concern there with Johnny Mac. John, let's last thing on the offense here, and before we move over to the defense, I'll get to our super chats as well. Between the two, quarterback, obviously quarterback 1, Jalen Hurts is locked in. I believe quarterback 2, Tanner McKee is locked in. Who do you like as QB3? They drafted Kyle McCord in the 6th round this year out of Syracuse. He formerly played at Ohio State. He's a St. Joe's prep kid. And they also traded in the Kenny Pickett trade for Dorian Thompson-Robinson from Cleveland. So 2 quarterbacks vying for that 3rd spot. How do you see it playing out in camp, Johnny Mac, for those unaware of what's going on back there?
Yeah, there's no competition. Kyle McCord's going to be the 3rd quarterback, unless he Clayton Thorson's the offseason, which is not going to happen. It's really impressive. He already showed he's a million times more impressive than Clayton Thorson or somebody like Carson Strong. Got a lot of hype as an undrafted kid 1 year. Already just in the spring. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's the backup in 2026. But for Dorian Thompson-Robinson, it's about playing well in preseason, opening the eyes of others, and trying to get claimed off waivers by another team looking for a 3rd quarterback. And by the way, if he gets through waivers, I think the Eagles will bring him back to the practice squad and want to continue to work with him. But obviously, you want to be on the roster. So,
right.
And if he plays well in the preseason, somebody will claim him because there's a lot of teams that need a 3rd quarterback. And he's got some talent. Eagles liked him coming out of UCLA, but they are really enamored with Kyle McCord. That's not even going to be a competition.
Can I ask a basic question? Why is it that I feel like the Eagles want backups that are nothing like their starter? Like if you look at the 2 backups right now, and let's just assume it's going to be McKee and McCord, they're like pocket passing quarterbacks versus you have Jalen Hurts, who's this elusive, playmaking, dual threat ability quarterback. And, you know, conventional wisdom, or at least my thought process would be, yeah, if you lose your quarterback, you're obviously going to lose a much better player than the backup, but at least you can run a similar offense coming in with the new guy and hope to have success. With the Eagles, it seems like they think they have a better chance to almost completely change the offense if they lose their starting quarterback. Are they right to do it that way? What's your thought process on the way they do that way? Because think about it. They've had Gardner Minshew. They've had Tanner McKee. They've had Kenny Pickett. All very different styles of quarterbacks than Jalen Hurts.
Well, the philosophy is you know, you want somebody who's good enough to win a game or two. That's always the philosophy.
Right.
It's not about style. It's not about, but it does speak about the difficulty in playing the style that they play with Jalen
Right.
Hurts.
It's a good point.
You can't replace, like, you can say, well, Dorian Thompson-Robinson can move a little bit. Yeah, he can move, but it's you can't play the way you play with Jalen Hurts with Dorian Thompson-Robinson.
Right. In other words, it's almost harder to you have to be really good to play the offense Jalen Hurts' way.
Exactly. So, it's not trying to replicate, it's trying to persevere. And you do have to ship some things and play a different style of football, which they're capable of doing. And arguably, which is the reason I've tried to explain that Jalen Hurts is 9th on the list with other executives and it's easier to do it that way. Like the minute Jalen Hurts ages out, it's very unlikely the Eagles are going to continue to play their style. I can't say 1,000%.
The league is changing.
Very, very, very unlikely that they're going to find a similar player to seamlessly play the same style. It's much easier to find backups who can be somewhat effective, like Gardner Minshew, Kenny Pickett, now hopefully Tanner McKee, hopefully down the road, Kyle McCord. There's more of those guys than there are of Jalen Hurts.
Makes a lot of sense. Johnny Mac, good stuff there on the offense. I wanted to prep everybody for the offensive side of the ball coming into training camp. After our commercial break, we will dive into the defense, and we'll kind of go through the same process, talk about the guys that were brought in. There's a lot of Timu guys over on the defense. We'll touch on them. We'll touch on the depth. We'll touch on the concerns, and we'll get into all of that coming up. Before we do that, I want to hit on our super chats. We got some on the offensive side of the ball here. Shout out to Sir Wolfie Wolf, says, shout out to Mac and Zander. What's up, brother? Shout out to you as well. Thanks for being here on a Football Friday. The season is here, my friend. Good to see you in here. Diego checks in. What's up, Diego? Great hearing from you this week, my man, over on Instagram. You know, I appreciate when any of our viewers reach out. I love our great community of people, and I appreciate our great community of people. Diego says, hi, Z and J-Mac. Thanks for making this show every day. If every rookie plays out, I think keep some, not all, your most impactful players such as Jalen Carter and Cooper. Thank you from Mexico. So Diego is one of our great Mexican fans. Johnny Mac here on Birds 365. Well, Diego, I think you're right about what you said. Johnny Mac, your thoughts on
that? You mean don't keep
some, not all. I'm not really sure exactly what he means. If every rookie plays out, keep some, not all.
But, yeah, that's what they did this year. I mean, they would have liked to have Milton Williams. They would have liked to have Josh Sweat. They couldn't afford them. So that demarcation line philosophy will continue because, again, rich people problems. The Eagles have too many good players. Can't pay them all, which is what happened this offseason. And if they continue to hit on rookies, it will continue to happen. So if you're philosophizing, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, plus Jahad Campbell if he hits and Drew Makuba turns into a top-tier safety, you got the same problem. You're going to have to let a few of those guys walk. But those are good problems. Still problems, but those are good problems.
Yep, no doubt. Diego, thank you, man. I appreciate you for being here, and thank you for the $10 super chat on a Football Friday. Dank Bird Gang checking in. What's up, Dank? How you doing, brother? Thanks for being here, and thank you for the $5 super chat. He says, if the continuity of our offensive personnel offsets the new guys on the offensive staff, does the defensive staff returning sort of offset the changes in defensive personnel? Interesting take there, or interesting question from Dank Bird Gang. I like it. John, your thoughts or your response to what Dank has to say?
Well, talent's more important than coaching. I would say that. I say that pretty consistently. And I'm not worried about the continuity on offense because I think there's more continuity than realized, which I kind of just mentioned. But just, Kevin's been here for many years. Nick knows Parks. There's more new names, but I don't think it's nearly as much upheaval as last year when they're bringing Kellen and Doug from outside the building. And I think by bringing Kellen and Doug and Caballero as well, if you want to go all the way down to the bottom of the staff from outside the building, and Kellen's running the offense with completely new terminology and schemes and thought processes, even though it reverted back to something similar. As good coaches do, they build around the strengths of the players. So all the Jalen Hurts offenses have looked similar because they're building around the strengths of the player. So it ended up, and I think it should end the conversation because they won the damn Super Bowl with all the upheaval.
Right.
Now, did it look pretty at all times? No. But if so many people use that as the deciding of everything, so why not decide and say, hey, guess what? They did it last year. Who gives a shit? That's kind of my philosophy. And Kevin's been here for years and years and years. Kevin got here when Nick got here. And he's been working with Jalen Hurts that entire time.
Does how good the defensive coordinator, though, is on the Eagles and defensive staff really, does that help at all? I mean, you got Vic Fangio. It'd be one thing if you had Sean Desai, and you're like, yeah, I don't think it's going to help much if your personnel's not good. When you have Vic, you saw him take two rookies and turn them into what they were. You saw him take Zach Bond and turn them into what they were. And I'm not saying no credit goes to the players. A lot goes to the players. But we talk about the odds, a lot on this show. Vic improves those odds, I think, for every player on this football team. How much does that help, having a guy like Vic Fangio who's that good?
Well, he's the best defensive coordinator in football. I said it consistently. I got a lot of shit for saying he was better.
You did get a lot of shit pre-Super Bowl. I will say that, including from me.
He's the best defensive coordinator in football, and that is validated by his peers because he's the one everybody copies. Forget about what I say. That's validated by his peers. No one has been copied more than Vic Fangio over the past decade and a half. So he's going to get the most out of this group than anybody else. I'm on board with that thought. However, Vic's also been around since, for 40 years. And he's always been, not always, but when he developed, he's been the best defensive coordinator for about 15 years, whether it was a head coach. You get my point. Guy running a defense. He's been the best defensive mind for about certainly over a decade, maybe back to 15 years. I don't have the number one defense every year. He gets more out of it than it would have, but that's the goal. That's the job of a coach. If you got 9-win talent, go get 10 or 11 wins. If you got 4-win talent, go get 6 or 7 wins.
Right. I do think he still has a good core, though. I think you have a lot of moving pieces, obviously, but the changes in personnel are big, but you still are returning a lot of good starters. So I think
you are, but you also lost a lot of good starters, which I think people dismiss for whatever
I think you
reason,
lost, though. There's 11 starters on defense, John. I think you lost all guys below. If you ranked them in order of importance, 1 to 11, I think you lost all guys. No, Sweat's probably in the top 6 of importance last year.
No, I think Sweat and Milton were. Certainly Slay was. I mean,
yeah,
I disagree with that.
I don't know.
They lost some big time talent. Now, from a whole, they had this demarcation line, and guys were above it. They were going to sign them. Guys that are below it, they weren't going to sign. Now, part of the reason, is also circumstance. If Milton Williams wasn't getting offers he was getting, he would have been above the line.
Right.
But at $26 million, he's below the line. Same thing with Josh. Slay age more than anything else. These are really good players. And then you have the Vic Fangio effect, I think, with Isaiah Rodgers and Oren Burks and guys like that. Getting those guys to play up to the level that they played up to. That to me is more of the Bick effect than Chow's a good player. He was a good player before Bick. He'll be a good player after Bick. Milton was a good player before Bick. He'll be a good player after Bick. Slay's been a borderline Hall of Fame player. Look, I'm never going to say ever, and Vic will be the first one to agree with me. Talent means more than coaching. And they still have plenty of talent.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but they lost significant talent. People overlooking that shouldn't be overlooking that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I thought it was a good question from you. Leon Banks checking in. What's up, Leon? Good to see you, my friend. It's an early one for you, Leon. You're normally a back half of the day guy. What's going on in your world? Thanks for being here. He said, J-Mac, how cooked is Dallas for delaying to pay Micah? Yeah.
Well, they're not cooked at all.
I don't know what the heck
I mean, Jerry has explained his philosophy, to be honest. I'm surprised he did, but he did.
It's still so moronic.
It is. I mean, they don't do it the right way. It doesn't make sense, but he likes to keep the Cowboys in the headline. He's going to pay him. I don't know how many times this has to happen and be, oh, they're screwed. They're not screwed. They're going to pay him. They're just paying the tax, the Jerry Jones tax. Keep it in the headlines.
Years ago, though, for $30 million. Now they're going to be paying him $42.
Well, I think a lot of people don't understand also the fact, like I saw a Jalen Carter story, and I'm not going to say who it was, but they're like, well, the Eagles will get them done as quickly as possible sometime during the season. They can't get them done.
I know. I saw that.
They can't get them done until after his third season. You're not allowed.
Got to be after the third season.
Yeah, you're not allowed. So they couldn't have signed, you have to understand that. You can't just, oh, Mike is great. Let me get him at the earliest point possible. Same thing with Jalen Carter. Maybe it works. And again, it's counterintuitive. You want it to go up this year for Jalen Carter because if it doesn't, you didn't have a good season. So you want him to have a good season, right? So, and again, I'm not going to pick on anybody, but anybody saying, well, the Eagles have to sign Jalen Carter right now. They can't. Now, the Cowboys, though, they wait and wait and wait, and they pay a tax for it. But whether it's Dak Prescott, whether it's CD Lamb, and everybody out, they always pay them. So for the people that they're not going to, no, they're going to pay them. But are they going to pay a tax? Yes. Because they do business the wrong way. No question about it.
We'll see what ends up happening. We'll see how much Micah gets. Leon, thanks for the super chat, brother. Jason 18, thank you, my man. Jason 18. By the way, I appreciate your comment over on ZK's Garage. Jason 18, that was pretty cool to see you over there. Thanks, brother. He drops him with a $10 super chat today. He says, do you think people will catch up to Vic's scheme this year? Even though the way they drafted makes it seem they want players to disguise better, that's where the cross-training and flexibility comes in. It's an interesting question. John, your thoughts?
No, I haven't caught up to it yet. And again, well, they caught up to Ed Donatel's version. They caught up to Sean Desai's version. And by the way, Vic's scheme is always evolving. Like, it's not like he stands still, but there's some basic philosophies. And the basic idea is to always have the extra guy in coverage. And to make the quarterback wait post-snap to decipher what's going on. That's that. If you want to boil it down in its most basic sense, he used to be heavier quarters at one point, quarters coverage. Now it's more cover 3. He's always changing depending on his talent, depending on who his best players are. And I envision in 2026, you're going to see a completely different mindset with the linebackers if it's Bond and Campbell than you had last year. if you go back to his Miami defense the year prior, which is pretty damn good, which for some reason people don't realize because they had a bunch of injuries at the end. The Van Ginkel stuff is more indicative of, I think, where they're going to be going, but he didn't have that player last year. Or at least, a lot of people made the Bond connection, but he didn't use Bond like he used Van Ginkel because he thinks Bond is a better stack linebacker than edge rusher, whereas Van Ginkel's more edge rusher than stack linebacker. So he used them differently. But I think Campbell factors into that role, the Van Ginkel role. So it's always evolving. It's always changing. And that's the brilliance. And I always say about Vic, it's not the scheme. You can go online and get literal diagrams of everything he does. Teaching it is the key. And he teaches it better than everybody else.
Yes, he does. No doubt about it. A-Team, great question, man. Appreciate the super chat. Appreciate all the super chats today. The final off-season show, everybody. At least it is in my eyes. Next week comes around. I know they're not reported till Tuesday, not on the field till Wednesday, but it's Eagles season next week, baby. I'm ready for it to rock. So thank you all for being here today. Let's hit that like button for me. Can we get well over 100 likes today? We got 253 in the YouTube chat, over 600 watching on all the different platforms right now. Can we get over 100 likes on YouTube? Come on, everybody. The season is here. It's time to smash that like button here on Birds 365. I appreciate all of you guys for being here. We'll take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll dive into the defense. All right, I want to dive into the defense, what happened there, some of the things to prep for camp coming up, and still plenty of things to talk about, and then we'll close it out with a little training camp preview, the most important position battles, the most important players to watch, and maybe some big picture debate topics at the end of the show. Not debate, but thoughts of things that people have debated this offseason. We'll do all that coming up next on Birds 365.